When you look at the cast of Final Fantasy XV, there's an array of strong characters, and they each helped to bring the narrative to life in their own way. At the forefront there is of course Prince Noctis Lucis Caelum himself, and he was supported by his entourage of Ignis Scientia, Gladiolus Amicitia, and Prompto Argentum. You've then got the enigmatic antagonist Arden Izunia, and supporting characters like Lunafreya Nox Flore, Iris Amicitia, and Aranea Highwind. Each brought their own individual qualities to the table, but none of them ended up holding a candle to Kenny Crow, a surprise package who in many ways ended up stealing the show, staking a claim as the one true protagonist of the entire Final Fantasy XV universe. On face value though, Kenny's wider role within the narrative wasn't immediately clear, but that's because the developers wanted to reward players who like to delve a little deeper. We saw this with other elements in the game like the Pitios Ruins dungeon, which had plenty of hidden morsels of information about Eos' history scattered throughout. And with Kenny, a similar approach was used. It meant that when you packaged everything together, you were left with perhaps the most developed character we'd ever seen within the entire Final Fantasy franchise. And I'd say that would explain why there has been such a significant demand for us to feature Kenny Crow within our Origin series ever since we started way back at the end of 2017. I mean, just look at how votes have swayed in his favour, and that's only increased following the release of the recent Comrades patch, where he appears as a boss. Before we get started though and delve into the origins of Kenny Crow, I'd like to give a huge hand to Chris for helping us to collate everything together for this video. And I'd like to say that if you are a fan of our Origins series, be sure to subscribe as things are going to get even more interesting in that regard in the near future. Make sure you hit that notification button as well to get notified when we publish new content, and as always, let us know in the comments who you'd like us to cover in a future Origins video. Alright, so let's get started with the secret origins of Kenny Crow. The royal family of Insomnia has been no stranger to tragedy, nor has it been a stranger to conflicts between two brothers. And this was epitomised by the clash that occurred between Arden Lucis Caelum and his younger brother Somnus 2,000 years before the main events of Final Fantasy XV took place. Despite his charitable work treating those who had been afflicted by the Star Scourge, Arden had the throne stolen from underneath him by Somnus, who then cast Arden out, hiding him on the island of Angelgard for all eternity. This fraternal violence set the stage for a great crisis that would later occur within Eos, and it also set a precedent for backstabbing within the royal line. But the tragedy of Arden paled in comparison to that of King Regis's lost son, Diem Lucis Caelum. Diem was the elder twin brother of Noctis, born to Regis Lucis Caelum and his wife, Queen Aulia, during the year 735 of the modern era. And for the first few days of his life, Diem was destined to be the heir to the Lucian throne. This was ordained due to him being the elder son, but even as a baby of only a few days old, Diem acted the part, easily contented and forging a strong maternal bond with Aulia. This was the complete opposite of Noctis, who was often inconsolable, having to be cared for by helpers instead of his parents. But before the traditional proclamation could be confirmed a week later, where Regis would officially announce to the kingdom that his children had been born and that Diem would be his successor, signs of the Star Scourge appeared upon the elder twin. The oracle of the time, Sylvia Nox Flore, was called with haste to treat Diem, but it was to no avail. This strain of Star Scourge did not appear to be treatable, and immediately Regis called for his closest advisors. Claris Amicitia, Cid Sophia, and Wescom Armour all gathered, and their fear was that Diem was tainted, perhaps even part demon due to how severe his affliction was, and so they resolved to hide the boy from the public. He would be the latest dirty little secret in what was now a rather long line of secrets held by the Lucian bloodline. Following this decision, Noctis was then proclaimed the sole son of Regis and Aulia and their heir to the throne, and few outside of the royal family's inner circle even knew of Diem's existence or what his parents had done to him. To maintain the secret, Diem was kept in darkness below Insomnia, never to see the light of day, at least until a cure could be found. A small staff were assigned to attend to him, but they quickly came to resent him. not because he was ill-behaved or troublesome in any way, but because they were forced to spend their entire lives below ground, lest they reveal the secret of his existence. It was clear to Diem at this point that only Aulia seemed to care for him. The maternal bond they had formed was still there, and she had not actually been consulted on the decision to stow Diem away. And Regis also showed contrition in the immediate aftermath, as did his close advisors, but it was clear to Diem as time passed that he had been completely set aside for Noctis, and that no active attempts would be made by Regis to change that situation. The only thread of hope he had was his mother, but when Aulia then died suddenly, the infant Diem was left completely in the hands of a resentful, uncaring and disgruntled bunch of servants. Regis stopped visiting altogether in time, as Diem did nothing but remind him of his lost queen, and after Noctis was then nearly killed by a Marilith, the king kept the prince closer than ever. Diem had no place in his heart any longer. Diem's hideaway then became a prison, and he started to become much more resigned to his fate. Perhaps he would end up dying there alone, never having made his mark on the world. And the more he thought about this, the more he started to feel resentment towards his father, but also his brother, who had been afforded the life that he had deserved had it not been for his cruel hand. And it was with this in mind that Diem started to hatch plans as to how he would escape his cage, something he achieved with surprising ease. It's unclear when or how Diem escaped his hideaway, but he had managed to escape from insomnia by the time he was a young adolescent, having exploited how relaxed the security had become due to the diminished interest anyone had in his existence. When he found out what had happened, Regis was initially concerned, but as Diem had no ties to him or the kingdom outside of his word, these concerns lifted, as who would believe the ramblings of a teenage boy who was afflicted by the Star Scourge? It meant that Diem was free to live his own life the way he wanted. But then he came to the realization about what this actually meant. Even though he had been a prisoner his entire life, Diem had still been clothed, fed and looked after. But outside in the real world, he now had to fend for himself, and it wasn't something he had been remotely prepared for. Desperate to survive, Diem resorted to many unsavory things, and he would often be found rummaging around garbage disposal units in search for food. Rarely did he venture to more crowded places like Lestalem, instead choosing less populated rest areas. And this saw Diem venture all the way out to Old Lestalem in the Clane region. Here he was running through the bins of a local eatery, and its owner, Kenneth, caught him in the act. However, instead of chasing off the diseased child like some wild beast, Kenneth chose to extend a hand and offer support to Diem. Diem was shocked, but Kenneth explained that seeing him brought back memories of his son, who had become afflicted by the Star Scourge and was driven away from home, later succumbing to the disease. What Kenneth didn't share was that he had been the primary factor in his son leaving. He couldn't stand the shame of having a son who had the plague, and in the years that followed he had been consumed by guilt. Diem offered a chance at redemption, but he also saw an opportunity. You see, Kenneth was the owner of the Crow's Nest, a once thriving local eatery that people flocked from all around to eat at due to its signature dish, Kenny's special salmon. But after suffering from the emotional distress of everything that had happened with his son, Kenneth didn't have the same drive and vigor anymore, and he was now facing bankruptcy. He needed a miracle to save his business, and in Diem, he saw his miracle. So in exchange for food, water and shelter, he proposed that Diem would become the diner's new mascot, Kenny Crow. Given his situation, Diem accepted almost immediately, but the thing that sold it for him was that due to having to wear a costume, he would be able to walk around in broad daylight, mixing with actual people, all without the fear of abuse due to his affliction. Now, things started off small, but as Kenneth had hoped, Kenny Crow started to become a viral sensation, and after he released a range of cheaply produced but hilarious commercials where they introduced the "Caw, kids" catchphrase, Kenny Crow and the Crow's Nest became the talk of the land. Within a year, the Crow's Nest was not only saved from the abyss, but was also the most successful restaurant chain in the land, with new branches opening in a whole host of rest areas. For Diem, this was exhilarating. He was at the heart of the phenomenon, the centre of everyone's attention. It was as if it was meant to be, and his dark past faded to the back of his mind. He had found acceptance in the faces of smiling patrons, and because of this, he refused to take his costume off. incorporating the mascot's identity into his own. It meant that, for all intents and purposes, Diem became Kenny Crow. But the fame was not to last. The marketing campaign grew stale with time, and the demand to see the mascot japing and clowning around dwindled. That's not to say that Kenny Crow disappeared. He was still very much the face of the Crow's Nest, and statues of him had been stationed at each location, but now they were for ironic selfies. Diem's 15 minutes of fame appeared to be over, and Kenneth, now reveling in the restaurant chain's success, paid little attention. Forgotten again, Diem began to seethe, and memories of his former life bubbled up to the surface. And when he then saw his father and brother on TV, he resented that his rightful place was stolen from him. He had been the belle of the ball for a momentary passage, but he deserved more, and after again languishing in obscurity, he began to plan his revenge in earnest. The plans were slow to form though, and by the time he had turned 20, Diem was still no closer to stealing the throne back from his brother. His only solace came from fishing, and he was often seen catching fresh fish for the restaurant, still in costume, so that Kenneth could continue to serve Kenny's special salmon as the signature dish in Old Lestalem. And if patrons happened to see, he'd still find the time to whip out his old catchphrase saying, "Caw, kids, I'm the king of fishing," albeit with a lot less enthusiasm than he had done in the past. And it was during one such fishing escapade that he heard the shocking news of the Niflheim Empire's attack on his home of Insomnia, coupled with the supposed deaths of his father and brother. Seeing his rightful home under attack, and the life he was supposed to have be utterly destroyed, awoke something in Diem. His royal blood boiled, and out of nothing, he summoned his own complete armiger. But much to his chagrin, his armiger manifested not as royal arms like his forefathers, but as the royal salmon, the signature dish of the Crow's Nest. Diem wept at what was ultimately another cruel joke played upon him by fate, but he had gained new resolve. In spite of his scarred appearance from the Star Scourge and his odd powers, he believed the time was right for him to reveal his true identity to the world. He would seize upon the chaos in the capital, oust the occupiers, and reveal himself as the true-born, long-lost heir to Lucis. It was at this time, however, that Kenny realised he could no longer remove his costume. The Star Scourge had bonded his body to the crow suit, and even though he had unlocked his kingly birthright, his curse had evolved and truly trapped him inside the assumed persona that had brought him so much joy over the years. Diem wouldn't let this further setback stand in his way though. He could hide no longer. But just as he stepped out of the Crow's Nest, destined to walk on Insomnia, a sleek, black car pulled up to his diner, and out stepped his brother. Noctis was alive. Diem was consumed with relief and rage in equal measure. Relief that his family wasn't truly lost, and rage at seeing his usurper face to face and not being able to reveal himself. He took solace in surprising his younger brother instead, tormenting him by pretending to be a statue and spooking Noctis when his friends convinced him to pose with the popular mascot. But that wasn't enough, and after the quartet left, Kenny tracked Noctis around the countryside from Crow's Nest to Crow's Nest, pranking the prince until he grew suspicious of any crow. This continued until they arrived in Alticia, but after the destruction of the city, Diem lost contact with his brother and feared him dead. Despondent, he started to wander the lands again, wondering what his purpose in life was meant to be, and as the nights grew longer and the demons started to ravish the land, Diem had another crisis of conscience. He withdrew to Lestalem like many refugees, sheltered by the rebuilt Order of Glaives, and he started to count down until the end of days. But after hearing Glaives talk about the great Lucian kings of old and how they gave them strength, Diem realised what his purpose was. He would finally fulfill the role he was born for, as the guardian of the people. Mustering courage he didn't even realise he had, Diem decided to lend his aid. This started small at first, with Diem joining scouting missions and covering general guard shifts, but as his confidence grew, Diem volunteered for missions outside of Lestalem to tackle bigger and bigger foes. It saw prominent members of the resistance like Libertas and Cord take notice, but when Diem ended up going on a mission that started to go south, everyone in Lestalem took notice. Seeing numerous glaives in danger, Diem realised he had no choice but to reveal his true identity, and so he summoned his royal salmon armiger, vanquishing the foe with ease and saving everyone from danger. When they returned to camp, rumours spread of Kenny's deeds, but no one questioned why he still wore the mascot suit or how he had access to such power. Humanity just needed all the help it could get. Well, no one questioned it except Cor. He immediately realised who Kenny must be, King Regis's long-lost son. But despite being filled with remorse for what had happened to Diem, Cor decided not to reveal the truth, and instead chose to let Diem bask in his newfound glory as the hero of Lestalem and the new Order of Glaives. Not because he was Diem Lucis Caelum, son of Regis Lucis Caelum and brother of Noctis Lucis Caelum, but because he was Kenny Crow, the mascot of a restaurant chain who could once again serve to galvanise the land. But when King Noctis then returned and set the world right by defeating Arden Azunia at the cost of his own life, Diem was left with a choice. As prosperity returned to the world, he debated whether the time was finally right for him to reveal himself as their long-lost heir, or whether he should continue remaining a legend due to his role in protecting the people and bringing them joy. And so, that concludes the story so far of Diem Lucis Caelum, or is it Kenny Crow? What's interesting is that there's still so much story to tell, but at this point, it's difficult to tell if we will ever see a true conclusion. Square Enix revealed episode Kenny on the 1st of April 2018, April Fool's Day, but following Tabata's resignation and the subsequent cancellation of episode Luna Freya, Aranea and Noctis, perhaps episode Kenny has also been cancelled. The only consolation is that there have never been any official statements, so perhaps no news is good news. All I know is that I can't wait to find out more, especially as I've been hearing rumours that there could also be alternative endings included. Perhaps we'll even get to see Kenny sit on the throne and become the head chef of the Crow's Nest. We can all dream, eh? Sorry, I can't keep this up any longer. Happy April Fools, everyone. I'd like to hope everyone realised that this has been an absolute complete joke. But you can never be too careful. It's good to be explicit. Honestly though, with everything that's been going on with my health recently, this has been just what we needed. Something fun and quirky that's an extension of what we would normally do. We had the idea for this right after episode Kenny was teased by Square Enix last year, but with everything that's been going on with my health recently, Lauren and I had no idea if we'd actually be able to produce it in time. And in that regard, I would really like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Chris for really stepping in and helping out massively with the production so that we could actually get it out in time. I'd also really like to say thank you to everyone who sent messages of support to us over the past week. It's been so heartwarming to see that we've fostered such a great community, and it's a real inspiration for us to keep doing what we do and finding new and fun ways to entertain you all. And I also just want to say thank you all so much for watching. We genuinely hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please share it around. Who knows, maybe we can go viral like the real Kenny Crow. Make sure you subscribe too, as our next video is going to be us looking at Final Fantasy 15 for real. And now that the game has been officially completed, we're going to be hitting the Final Fantasy 15 Origins pretty hard. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I'll see you next time for more Final Fantasy videos.